That's the job of an entrepreneur. That's what's called the entrepreneurial spirit. So yes, he has put remarkable deadlines and goals for himself, and he has remarkably failed. But if you look back, those failures are great successes. So he has put huge goals, and he has been able to achieve, let's say, even 50% of it. That's quite significant.
Welcome to the Gist on Stratnews Global. I'm Surya Gangadharan. Electric car maker Tesla's plans to hit the Indian market appear to have taken a backseat. We had Elon Musk cancelling his visit to India literally at the last minute, citing various company obligations. Then we had reports that plans for new plants in Mexico and possibly India had been put off. And we also have reports that there are doubts about a small car or maybe a car for the mass market. I have with me Jaijit Bhattacharya. He's an entrepreneur and also the head of the Center for Digital Economy Policy Research. Jaijit, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Surya.
Jaijit, you've been looking at the EV market for a while, and what are your thoughts on this manner in which Elon Musk cancelled his visit? What do you think is happening?
These are economic decisions being taken. If you look at the nature of the Indian market, it's obviously a very price sensitive market. Undoubtedly, it's the
Yeah.
third largest market, but it's third by a wide margin. The Chinese market is almost double the size of the US market. The US market is triple the size of the Indian car market. So that's the kind of difference we have. In the price sensitive Indian market, getting in a Tesla with their existing products is very challenging. And that's something that Tesla had recognized. So, what they wanted to do was come out with a new car which is grounds up built, which is cheaper and dedicated for an Indian market. I would not necessarily say mass market because that still was a $20,000, $25,000 car, which in India is not really mass market, it's mid market. But
Yeah.
globally, and specifically in US, that is mass market. But unless they have a Tesla at that price point, getting the Indian market is very, very difficult. If you look at the cheapest car that US had, that Tesla had in US, is the $40,000 Tesla Model 3 that they came out with. That's double the price of the Chinese EVs for that matter, and it's also double the price of the Tata EVs. A Nexon costs $20,000 and less, and therefore, if somebody has to pay double of that, there needs to be a valid reason to do that. Now, if you look at $40,000 from an Indian perspective, that amounts to 32 lakhs, and at 32 lakhs you can get a large SUV, you can get a Toyota Fortuner, just to put the comparison. And by the time they land up in India, it will not be $40,000; it will be at least $50,000, if not more.
Yeah.
And therefore, that
Yeah.
brings it in competition with what are supposed to be called luxury cars, which is the Mercedes, the BMW. Given that Tesla really is quite Spartan inside, anybody who has driven Tesla, it is feature rich for sure, but it look and feel is Spartan, and therefore there is a lot of convincing to be done as to why somebody should pay that much of money for a Spartan car compared to some of the EVs that's coming from the known luxury brands in India. And therefore it would have been a tough competition for Tesla to sell a car which is not at a price point that's acceptable in the Indian market. So one way of reaching out to the Indian market was to create a car from grounds up. Now that itself is very, very expensive to create a new car from grounds up. The second, therefore, mechanism is to take your existing platforms and then strip them down, which is now what Tesla has announced a couple of weeks back is what they are going to do. They're going to take their existing car, strip it down, make it cheaper. But that's also not the complete story of car building. The other part of the story is that you've got huge capital costs. These multi-billion dollar plants are massive. Now, if you don't utilize it, your per car cost goes up and you keep incurring losses. So, what Tesla is trying to do is increase production by 50% and fully utilize its existing capacities rather than going and setting up more plants in Mexico and in India and so on and so forth. It's these economies of scale that is helping the Chinese companies come out with cheaper cars and grow faster, besides many other things, but this is one of the factors. And therefore, from a plain economic perspective, Tesla has taken the call to first utilize its existing capacities fully rather than going out and setting up more multi-billion dollar plants in India and in Mexico.
Mhm. So Musk would have known about all this, the company financials, the economy, the economics going forward. Then why all the buzz, the hoopla about the India visit?
So yes and no. As Tesla and as a CEO of Tesla, you can't ignore the third largest car market in the world. So Tesla has a good grip in US, although it's slipping, and it used to have a good grip in China, which is again slipping. Now, if you don't get into the third market, which is one of the fastest growing markets, what justifies the valuations of Tesla and how will Tesla get its future growth? So for Tesla, India is critical. There's no doubt about it, and that's the recognition which forced Tesla to go down the path it has gone through. Having reached this path, they suddenly saw the Chinese in the last 1 month and 1 to 2 months coming in heavily with very low cost cars in both Europe and US. And now the Chinese are setting up these plants in Mexico and therefore using the benefits of the North American treaty to push their low cost cars into US, bypassing all the trade barriers that US has put up. So the US protectionism is not going to defend Tesla for a long time. So it required the CEO of Tesla's urgent attention to protect their own castle. You can't be building new castles while your existing castle is under threat. If US falls for Tesla, there is no India market, there is no China market. They have to make sure that the US market is protected. And that's their immediate focus. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to come out with a quick model which is going to be built up, a quick, cheap model, which is going to be built up in the existing plants, which will be then sold in US to compete against the cheaper Chinese EVs coming in. Once they have protected their own market, it's only then that they're ready to come to the Indian market. Now, these were happening very, very fast. So it's a pertinent question that why didn't Elon Musk think about it before he made these commitments? When he made those commitments, the market situation was different. It is now a very changed situation.
Mhm. Musk has often made these claims that he'll achieve such and such by such and such deadline, and then fails to live up to it. Uh, are you telling me that perhaps he's kind of overpitched himself?
That's the job of an entrepreneur. That's what's called the entrepreneurial spirit. So yes, he has put remarkable deadlines and goals for himself, and he has remarkably failed. But if you look back, those failures are great successes. So he has put huge goals and he has been able to achieve, let's say, even 50% of it. That's quite significant because his statements motivates the entire organization. It's not just for the public consumption, it's to motivate his workforce and the people to be able to scale up faster and faster. So one really shouldn't be holding a grudge against an entrepreneur for failing to match up to their own set goals. But from an Indian perspective, if he had gone ahead, he would have done a disservice to his investors, and it would have been an ultra wise decision to just go ahead and set up a plant for the sake of ego. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
from a larger corporate sense, that he did not let ego override, and he was able to quickly change his decision and take a path which is appropriate for Tesla at this point of time.
So would you say the
Also, if I
Indian
may add
government may
to
have? Yeah, yeah. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I just no, another thought that's coming to my mind is the fact that we still do not have a very evolved infrastructure in terms of charging infrastructure in India. So if
Yeah.
Tesla really had to sell, what would power these cars? So it will be a huge job for Tesla to actually also set up the infrastructure, right? And that's something that Tesla cannot afford at this point in time. So they have to conserve the capital and push it towards a direction which is more profitable and more urgent for Tesla than picking up a large battle at India. India has not been a simple market. We have not seen any US company succeed till date. They've exited. They have tried to come back. There are some that are still trying to come back,
Yeah.
but there have been a complete absence of US entities, be it car makers, be it motorcycle makers, and then they've tried to come back through JVs like Harley Davidson has tried to do. They exited and then they came back through a JV with Hero Motors. Similarly, Ford is now trying to come back. But a powerhouse of motor vehicles does not have a foothold in one of the largest markets in the world and one of the fastest growing markets in the world. That's something that is a far more worrisome issue to look at. And therefore, if Tesla is having a rethink, I think probably they should have a deeper rethink. Now, that may not be good for consumers
Could
in
the
India,
Indian
and that may
government
not be
have?
good for.
Yeah. Could the Indian
No, I was
government
merely
have done
saying that.
better than? I mean, could the Indian government have done better rather than chasing Tesla? Could they have looked elsewhere?
No, I mean, at the point of time that the Indian government chased Tesla, it was important that we had a green industry setting up, and Tesla is kind of the harbinger of new ESG technologies coming in. So it is important that we had the component industry in India, the ecosystem in India, and so on and so forth. And Tesla would have played a very important role. Even now, from an Indian government perspective, an Indian consumer perspective, Tesla is important. So as and when they decide, as and when they come out with a smaller car and they grow and they are able to fill up their existing capacities and then look at building up the plant in India, it'll be good for India because then all the ecosystems, the infrastructure, and so on will come up. Nobody would have guessed that COVID will come in. Nobody would have guessed that Ukraine war will happen, Israel war will happen, and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. All of these have had an implication on the competitiveness of US companies, and also the fact that there is a stranglehold on supply chain by the Chinese companies, which helps them in getting their set of products much cheaper than what a Tesla would get. And these are things that people would not have had foresight on. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have done what they have done and that they should not continue to attempt to do what they're trying to do, which is trying to get Tesla into India, and India and Tesla, for its own good, should try and get into India.
But what you're also telling me is that the Chinese make better electric vehicles, cheaper electric vehicles than Tesla or perhaps any other American or even European manufacturer.
So, as per the reports that are coming in and as per the tests that are being done, it appears that the Chinese vehicles are almost as good, if not better, in some cases, as compared to the European vehicles and the US vehicles. So, from a consumer perspective, if they're getting something which is similar and is cheaper, then why wouldn't they go for it?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, these vehicles have not been tested for a much longer period of time, right? So, if you look at a Toyota, people have been using it for 50 years, 60 years, so they know what a Toyota means. But they haven't used the Chinese EVs for a much longer time. So, they do look flashy, they do give a little longer range, they are cheaper. But how will they perform 4 years down the line, 5 years down the line? We still don't know. So, from a consumer preference, perhaps people would still like to go for tested products, which have all the certifications, all the backings. Um, but they're probably not willing to pay that much more of a premium. So the price difference between a Chinese EV and the Teslas and the European cars have become significantly large. So it is something quite worrisome for both Europe and for US, and it's playing into the geoeconomics of the world.
Where would you say Indian car makers are placed, especially companies like Tata's that are heavily into electrics? You think they can? I mean, they already are in the lead in this market. Uh, Going forward, how do you place their prospects?
So, an entity like Tata's has obviously been able to innovate quite significantly. Their entire product portfolio has been completely churned, and so is the case with Mahindra's for that matter. And they're giving a run for the money for many of the foreign players who are based in India. Um, Now, if you look at the Indian market in terms of the market share of EVs, the Tatas dominate, and then there are the Koreans and Mahindras and so on and so forth. So, from the market perspective, it seems that Tata is more competitive. But as I said, there is a stranglehold on supply chain that China has, and therefore Chinese companies have, and therefore they're able to get the components cheaper. They're able to get the batteries cheaper, which is the key point. And let me not beat around the bush. And the critical minerals that go into the batteries is something that the Chinese have a stranglehold on. In fact, they put export taxes on some of the minerals so that those minerals don't go out of China and get processed elsewhere. So that's this huge benefit, competitive advantage that China is getting, which is in a way an unfair trade practice. And therefore, if we look at it from the larger perspective of the advantages that the Chinese companies are getting, and those are unfair advantages, then perhaps they will end up being more competitive. But if we are
Mhm.
putting a level playing field, I strongly believe that the Indian players, both Tatas and Mahindras, are extremely competitive in this space.
Mhm. But they can't survive for long without all those little tariff barriers and so on.
I mean, that's how the Indian car industry grew, and we have become a competitive industry in the world because of the tariff barriers. It is not necessarily so that a tariff barrier is a bad word. If
Mhm.
we are able to generate value within the country, then that is how it should be. Does it lead to a significant increase in the cost of operations of the economy? Does the cost of economy goes up? It has not been proven otherwise. We have got millions and millions of jobs in the car industry. If we were importing cars because it was cheaper somewhere else, then we
Yeah.
would have been probably a bankrupt country because 20% of the economy is automobiles. They are the ones who are
Yeah.
consuming steel, they're consuming rubber, they're consuming all kinds of things, and therefore, if we if we perceive that tariffs are necessarily bad, that is not true from an economic perspective at all. So we
I mean,
need
do
to
you
do what we
see?
need to do. Yeah.
Mhm. See, when you look at the Chinese car market, there are hordes of manufacturers, hundreds of them. Do you see a
Yes.
similar situation developing in India? Because there's a lot of software going into an electric car. And does that give us an advantage in some respect?
Well, even the Chinese are turning out to be good in software. So I don't think that will be a differentiator. And we are exporting the software. So we are an automobile software manufacturer, right? Which is different from being
Yeah.
an automobile manufacturer. In terms of number of automobile players, yes, we have seen that growing up in India. We've got plenty coming up, and they are specialized in various activities. There are EVs for defense. There's EVs for petroling. There are EVs for various other activities, including tractor EVs.
Yeah.
I think both in China and India and rest of the world, we will see a consolidation because there is a certain advantage that comes in when you've got larger number of volumes because you can negotiate better with your suppliers and therefore your prices keep going down. So the aspects of economies of scale kick in, and so there will be consolidation. But at a time when there are large number of players, it leads to innovation. So companies may innovate and die, but that innovation gets picked up by those who are surviving, right? And so, what the Chinese situation will lead to is more innovation, just like we see a tremendous amount of innovation in two-wheeler EVs in India. It's one of the most
Yeah.
innovative two-wheeler EVs in the world. The same is what's happening in China right now, and I think that by the time the Indian four-wheeler EVs starts coming in large numbers, we should see innovation happening in India also, which will give us the competitive advantage that that is required to break into the global market. So when you're talking about Indian EVs, it's not just for the Indian market and protecting our market, but really going out to the rest of the world. There are 23 million EVs being sold in China. Do we have a slice of that market? There are roughly about 12 to 13 million. Sorry, not EVs, but cars, and 12 to 13 million cars being sold in US. We've got practically zero share of that market. Same with Europe, with
Yeah.
US and Europe and so on and so forth. So we need to build cars which are globally competitive. We need to have the Kias and Hyundais of the world, which were nowhere 20, 30 years back, and they're
Yeah.
dominating the markets globally. We need to have Tata's, Mahindras get into that space.
Mhm. Yeah. Not to mention, there's also VinFast, I believe, from Vietnam that has set up shop
Yeah.
in India.
That's right. That's right. So they're also struggling for the same reasons that the Chinese are giving them a run for the money, but they are moving
Mhm.
forward and they seem to have a very good product portfolio. They seem to be, getting consumers attracted to their products. So let's see how it fares in the Indian market because the Indian market is also a brand conscious market, and we
Mhm.
already have Tata's positioned as a better brand than a Vietnamese brand in that sense. But if it's a good product, then the consumers will obviously go for it.
So, last question. Is our policy towards electric vehicles, is it on track? Do you see it, is it alive to the market dynamics?
So it is. My only concern is that we should not withdraw the incentives too quickly. We have had the fame coming in, and then there was a question mark: will it continue or not? Which is the subsidies from the government. Then there are subsidies at the state
Yeah.
level. There is subsidies on the electric infrastructure. So initially, we do need to provide that, and if we withdraw it a little too early, that's going to be disruptive. And I
Mhm.
my hope is that the government sticks to its current set of incentives. Well, it needs to be weaned off over a period of time, but that there needs to be early warnings, significant signaling to the industry that those subsidies are being taken away, so that there is a gentle coming down of these support systems from the government. If it's taken out too quickly, then investments that were dependent on these subsidies will then become non-performing assets. So you need to be very careful how quickly we take away these support systems. But do keep in mind that in China, it's a continuous process. The land is free, power is kind of free, the input minerals are free, or at a very low cost. And therefore, we need to keep that in mind. By simply withdrawing these benefits, do we open up our market to the Chinese cars? That will not be a
Yeah.
very wise thing to do.
Mm. So anyway, tough choices ahead. Let's hope we make the right decisions. JG, thanks very much for that. Very informative. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Surya.
That's all we have for you on this edition of The Gist. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Thank you very much. Good day.